there, my name is Ashley and I work on the communications team here at Children's Wisconsin. It's been an exciting week as the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration recommended the emergency use authorization of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine for kids 5 to 11 years old. That was a mouthful, but what it ultimately means is that kids 5 to 11 will now be able to get a huge boost of protection from COVID-19. I have an expert here with me to help answer all of your questions on the topic. Dr. Smriti Khare is a pediatrician and the president of our primary care here at Children's Wisconsin. Thank you for taking time to answer questions today, Dr. Khare.
Welcome.
And thank you to those who posted questions prior to this discussion. If you have a question now, please leave it in the comments. We'll answer as many as we can today. Before we jump in, I want to note that this conversation will be based on the information available to us as of today, November 5th. And we're aware that as more information becomes available, these discussions may shift or adjust. Okay, let's jump in. Dr. Khare, we've heard this first question quite a lot already. Why do kids need the vaccine, considering COVID-19 hasn't impacted them as dramatically as it has adults?
That's a great question. I think we should just start with being very clear. COVID-19 has impacted kids. And, this vaccine approval is really a landmark moment for the vaccination campaign. We pediatricians, anybody who takes care of kids, are really excited about this moment. So if you look at the data, the American Academy of Pediatrics has said that upwards of 6.4 million children have tested positive for COVID since the onset of the pandemic. And I thought this data point was really interesting. The week of October 28th, we saw that children were 24.2% of the reported weekly COVID cases. And when you look at the population in general, children actually less than 18 years of age make up only 22.2% of the population. So it's definitely impacting them. When we start to think about the Delta variant, which we've talked about a lot this summer, the Delta variant itself has actually increased hospitalization rates for kids upwards of 5-fold compared to what it was before. So it is really one of those things that has made a difference. And then, there's the original COVID disease, and then all the other things that we really worry about for kids, something called the multi-system inflammatory syndrome for children. And we've had more than 5,000 children with this very serious illness that is linked to COVID. We've had almost 800 children die. So while this has been less impactful in the physical framework than for adults, it's definitely a disease that impacts kids as well. And some of the more recent literature shows that the ability for children to get COVID-19 is pretty much the same as adults. It's just that, physically they tend to do somewhat better than the adults, aside from all these awful things that I just talked about in terms of when some kids have had much more serious disease. But whenever I hear this question, I sort of pause and say, there's the physical aspect of the disease, and then there's all the other things that have impacted children. Children are really resilient and, generally recover better than adults from most adversity. But they are, definitely, if they get the illness, they are part of the spread of the illness as well. They can get the virus, they can transmit it. And so there is definitely the impact of that. We worry a lot about the mental and behavioral health aspects of this pandemic for kids. I mean, everything that they knew that their world used to be has gone topsy-turvy. I mean, just the ability to go to school, have sleepovers, be participating in sports, all of those things have been impacted. And, when we look at the data from the American Academy of Pediatrics or the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, we know that the mental health of children is just a national emergency at this point in time. So anything that we can do to bring back some normalcy and safety to children's life is just very important. The other thing that we often think about, have to think about with kids is if their caregivers are ill, that significantly impacts kids' lives as well. And hundreds of thousands of caregivers have lost their lives in this pandemic in the last 2 years. So for us to be able to do the work that we need to do to really find a way to decrease the disease burden in the community is all about keeping kids, communities, and families safe. And so this is an exciting moment in time. It's one of the ways that we can actually get our children healthier and safer, and our communities healthier and safer.
Okay. So can you break down the timeline for us? It is exciting. When will kids 5 to 11 years old be able to get the COVID-19 vaccine?
Yeah, it's thanks for that question, because I think I've been answering this a lot in the last couple of weeks. It is quite a process, and this is not this approving this vaccine for emergency authorization. It's not something anybody takes lightly, and there are many different phases of approval that have to happen. So we are, we're happy to say that a lot of the big hurdles were overcome this last week. The FDA's advisory committee was the first to sort of authorize this for emergency use authorization. Then the FDA itself authorized it, and then the CDC did, and then there's an independent advisory committee on immunization practices that has to vet it, and then the director of the CDC has to approve it. So many layers of that authorization happened. Once that happens, then there's actually the delivery system for the vaccine that gets triggered. And so this is still federally distributed, and then it goes to each one of the states, and then each one of the states, the Department of Health in each one of the states then has a process to make this a safe delivery of vaccine. And so that includes actually having individualized training for everybody who might give the vaccine, and making sure that all of those attestations are done. So all of that is to say that we anticipate in the state of Wisconsin that we'll be able to very successfully start to vaccinate kids on November 8th. And so there are many available places where you can get that. So, if you're eligible, you want to be able to get the vaccine as quickly as you can. And so the good news is, Children's Wisconsin is working with the Milwaukee Health Department, helping support their vaccine clinics in the Milwaukee Public Schools. All of our primary care clinics at Children's will have the vaccine available, and will be able to give it as part of normal course, as well as we'll have several Saturday clinics to be able to give the vaccines. Most of the large retail pharmacies, as well as the smaller independent pharmacies in town, will carry the vaccine as well. They'll have the opportunity to be able to deliver the vaccine. It really, again, our kids getting the vaccine approved a year after we started the general vaccination program really allows us to be much more competent in being able to get this out at lots of different places. So definitely, excited to be able to start to do this. I guess the bottom line is we're all ready. November 8th is when we expect to be able to deliver the vaccine.
Okay, next week.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So is the vaccine different for kids based on what you had just said? We've done about a year of vaccinating adults. How is the vaccine different for kids?
Yeah. So for the children 5 to 11 years of age, the vaccine is actually, it's got a different dosing, different dilution requirements. So how we prep the vaccine in our clinics is different, and the storage requirements are different. And the good news is all of this is from the learning that we've had over this last year of, how this vaccine can be delivered. So the dose for the younger kids is actually 1/3 of the dose for the adults. And so it's 10 micrograms versus 30 micrograms for the adults. So this lower dose, however, is given exactly like the adult vaccine was given. It's 2 doses, 21 days apart. part. What's been interesting is this is one thing that I get a lot of questions about is why is it age and not weight? Because a lot of things we do in pediatrics is actually based on the weight of the child. And, we've got children are often very different sizes when they're 5 years of age or 11 years of age. So all of the studies on this Pfizer vaccine was actually done based on age, and it's actually related to their impression about the maturity of the immune system. So that's really where they came up with the age factor. So for emergency use, for sure, we are very much following the regulations around the age because we know that's what was studied. And so it's important that we know that there was an incredibly successful study done for the 5 to 11-year-olds, and we want to stay within those parameters of safety. And that'll be something that will continue to be evaluated. But that's where the age thing comes from. So that's a little bit different from what we usually do for pediatrics.
Okay. And you just talked about space safety. That's my next question is the vaccine safe for kids?
Yeah. So again, a question that I get asked a lot, and yes, and I think, when I think about how we were answering these questions last December when the vaccine was first coming out, there was so much less knowledge that we had than we have today. So a year out, it really is so much easier to answer that question and, know that this vaccine is probably the most watched, most followed vaccine over the years, right? So we have so many different electronic technological ways to monitor the delivery of this vaccine and the side effects from it that I think we have a lot of knowledge to be able to say it's very safe. So the trial included somewhere close to about 4,700 children. So the way the trial works is a large portion of the children got the vaccine, and then we had a control group. So we were able to see the impact of that. The impact was very successful, some 90.1% effectiveness rate for the vaccine, which for a new vaccine is considered really good. We have seen with the adult vaccines that we started off with the lower effectiveness, and then as we gave it to larger populations, we're able to see that they were more effective. And so that's one of those things that, is very helpful to know. The side effects for the vaccine have been fairly similar to what we've seen for the adults. And again, it's a process that's been followed very closely. I think I logged on and listened to the advisory committee of the FDA, as well as the CDC Immunization Practices Committee. And the amount of data that was available and very transparently available to folks really reassures me, because there's lots of safety modeling that's been done that has helped us. And I'm sure we have some questions about myocarditis and things like that. So I will get into that in a little bit with a little bit more detail. One of the other questions I sort of tend to get when we think about this is, what's the long-term impact? And, I think this is where the actual technology and the understanding of how a vaccine works in the mRNA is important. So this is not something that sort of lives around in your body for a long time. The job of the vaccine is just to give the trigger to the immune system to create antibodies against the COVID virus, and then it's gone. And so, so it's not, there isn't really any concerns about the long-term impact, but it is something that we will continue to watch and understand and continue to look for safety. And again, a year later, it's easier to sort of say, we know it's safe because we've seen it be safe for a lot of the adults.
Okay. So what symptoms should we expect to see in kids after they've gotten the vaccine? Is it similar to adults?
Yeah, very much so. The side effects have been very consistent. Soreness at the site being the most common side effect. Some redness and swelling at the site, fatigue, maybe some headaches, some muscle aches, low-grade fevers for about a day or so. Some swollen lymph nodes. So, essentially the same profile that we had with the adults is what we're seeing with the kids. And again, similar to the adults, is the second dose that gives you more side effects than the first dose. They did not see any anaphylactic reactions or serious allergic reactions during the trial. That's not to say that that is not something that we are watching for, because, our data on the adults and the number of vaccines that were given, we do know that that is one of the possibilities. So all of the safety precautions will be taken for anybody who's delivering the vaccine. But that was good. And, it was kind of somewhat amusing because of the transparency of the data that was available during both of these advisory committee meetings. There were 5 serious issues that happened during the trial. One was a little kiddo who decided to ingest a penny while he was in the trial after the vaccine. Love pediatrics, things like that happen. And then a few little kiddos fell and broke their arms. And so, there really wasn't anything related to the vaccine, but it was interesting to always remind ourselves that kids will be kids.
Things we see in our emergency department and urgent care clinics all the time. Okay, you mentioned myocarditis. Can you talk about what that is?
Yeah, so this is something that I think everybody's quite worried about, and both the committees that approved the emergency use spent a lot of time talking about this. They had several pediatric cardiologists on. So myocarditis is essentially the inflammation of the muscle of the heart, and so obviously something that we worry about. After the vaccine was approved for the older children, there were cases of rare but cases of myocarditis that were seen in more often in males and more often older than 16 years of age. And the good news is almost everybody who was identified to have the side effect of the myocarditis has recovered, and most of them recovered quickly. And the side effect was most commonly seen within the first week after the vaccine, more often after the second dose. So that's sort of the background knowledge that we know, and that is what we worry about. Probably as a medical professional, the thing that I always want to know is, what does the actual disease cause? And so we know that COVID-19 viral infection actually causes a significantly higher number of myocarditis, which is often much more dangerous than what we've seen with the vaccine. So yes, is it a side effect that we worry about? Yes, absolutely. But again, when you look at the risk and benefit, and that was one of the things that we really looked at in the studies, it does demonstrate that the vaccine has far more benefit than the risk.
Okay. What other concerns have you heard from parents, for example, like fertility when it comes to the vaccine for kids? And can you help address those concerns for the families watching?
Yeah, that is one of those things that has, again, been a very common question. And, to put it plainly, there really is just absolutely no evidence that any vaccines, including the COVID-19 vaccine, causes any fertility problems. And I think the misinformation actually sort of started from a paper that really looked at the protein that the vaccines target, and talked about the similarity between that protein and some of the proteins in the placenta. But we have thousands of proteins that are similar to each other. And So, I guess a good analogy would be we've got lots of phone numbers that are similar to each other. But if you have a 6 and a 2 in your phone number, that doesn't mean that my phone number will work for yours. And so that's sort of the analogy that I use to understand this. And so the proteins may be similar, but they're not ones that can really target each other. But what I think is probably the best way to answer this question is we have something called the V-Safe program. And so it is a way that after you have received your vaccine, you can actually enter into the V-Safe program. And it's one of the ways that we've used technology, actually smartphones, and to be able to track the impact of the vaccines. So essentially, after I signed up for the V-Safe, I got regular text messages so that I could actually report if I had any side effects. So about almost 5,000 women, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the data down here, about 5,000 women actually became pregnant after their first dose of the COVID vaccine, and subsequently continued to have happy, healthy babies. The other really interesting research that's been done is research around in vitro fertilization. So it's essentially when women are already having some issues with fertility and go through some medical support to become pregnant. They looked at their patients who were vaccinated. They looked at their patients who actually have had previous COVID disease to see if that impacts fertility. And then they had patients who had neither the vaccine nor the COVID disease. And there was no difference in the ability to become pregnant in any one of those cases. So again, a year out, we have so much more data and so much more research that's happening every day that helps us to more confidently be able to answer this question and reassure people that fertility is not an issue with the vaccine.
Okay. Well, thank you for helping address a lot of those common questions. We're going to jump into more logistics. Where can kids get the vaccine at Children's and beyond? Can you talk about where they can get the vaccine?
Sure. So whenever I think of pediatric vaccines, I sort of always want to remind people that it's one of the great times to reconnect with your primary care doctors and your pediatricians, and also use that opportunity to get all of your medical care. And so, start with your doctor is always a great place to start. Obviously, at Children's, we're, very much excited to help support the community to get the vaccine. So we, as I said, we'll have the vaccine at all of our primary care offices. We'll have online scheduling available, and I'm presuming, Ashley, you'll help me remind everybody what our website is for that.
Yes.
Yeah, we anticipate opening the scheduling up on November 8th, so on Monday. And, we'll be texting the patients who are already connected with Children's as well. Now, just to be clear, Children's is supporting the community in this vaccination. And so you do not have to be a Children's Medical Group patient to be able to reach out to us if you're looking for that availability. But again, remember to go and see your pediatricians. Make sure that you're getting caught up on everything else your kids need as well. And we are really working on sort of like no missed opportunity as the way we're approaching vaccination. We're particularly concerned that, in all of the noise and excitement around the COVID-19 vaccination, that we don't forget that flu vaccination is also very important. And, we didn't see much influenza last year, but we were also doing a lot of community-based mitigation with masking and distancing. And this year, we're not doing as much as that. We didn't see influenza last year, so our immunity needs a little bit of boost from that as well to make sure that we're protecting ourselves against influenza. So you can actually receive the COVID vaccine and the flu vaccine at the same appointment. So that's important to know. And we are encouraging that, we'll do lots of different things around social media, emails, MyChart messages, texts, and, I think all of the healthcare systems and in town are really working on that to be able to get the vaccine.
Okay.
I mentioned all the pharmacies carry it, so that's one of the places to do it. And then Milwaukee Health Department and are working with the Milwaukee Public Schools to be able to find sites to vaccinate children as well. All of our local public health departments, I'm sure, will have the availability for the vaccine.
Okay. And to remind everybody, for information on the COVID vaccine through Children's, you can go to childrenswi.org/COVID vaccine. Okay. So with this younger age group, what if a child is scared or confused about getting a shot? Do you have any tips for families trying to explain what's happening going on to kids? And then also like bringing them into the office and actually getting the shot? Do you have any tips for those families?
Yeah. So isn't that the hardest for all parents? But, it's really important to listen to the kids and talk to them and, be okay with their anxiety. I mean, that's, asking kids to be brave is fine, but also just acknowledging, yeah, it is painful. It's okay. But, I think children will pick up from your own anxiety as well. So as caregivers, making sure that you are not transmitting that anxiety to the kids is also important. And, just making sure that you are being really good about explaining all of the benefits of what a vaccine will give them, the ability to really just normalize life and keep everybody healthy. I think kids are usually very caring about other kids. And so, that's one of the things that you can always use to be able to encourage them. And then be open with the vaccinators, like explain to them. I mean, most of us who work with kids, we get that. And we want to be considerate and make it as easy an experience as we can for the kids. So, and that's again where, if you go to a site where the children are already comfortable and familiar with the folks there, that's one of the things that definitely helps.
Okay. What's next for those younger than 5 years old? Will the vaccine be recommended for them?
Yeah, so there are trials actively in place right now for children younger than 5. There's I believe Pfizer is the company that's it goes down to 6 months of age, and they're actually getting ready to put their data together to bring it to the FDA. So the other vaccine companies, Moderna and is also doing active pediatric trials, and they're actually ready, fairly close to bringing that to the FDA as well. So we anticipate the vaccine moving down to younger age groups fairly soon, and definitely expect more choices besides the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine.
Okay. So now I think that covers everything we had planned. We're going to jump into questions provided by the audience. A quick reminder that we'll be trying to answer as many questions as possible now, but we will continue to answer questions in the comments after this conversation. So let's start with a couple questions that were asked in response to this event over the last couple of days. So the first one being, if a kid has already had COVID-19, should they get the vaccine anyways?
Yeah, that is a very common question. So thank you for whoever asked that question. And the answer is yes. What we do know is that a disease with COVID-19 will give you some immunity. What is unclear as to why some people have a really great antibody response and some don't. And some people can have a lasting antibody response and some don't. And so what that suggests is that natural immunity is somewhat unreliable to depend on for ongoing safety. And so adding the vaccine actually just boosts your natural immunity. That is what it's supposed to do. And so in some ways, you are the safest if you can get the vaccine, even if you've had the disease, because that will only make your immunity better.
Okay.
And actually, interestingly, within this particular study for the 5 to 11-year-olds, they did have almost, I want to say maybe, ugh, I hope I'm getting this number right, but I want to say at least 10% of the kids had actually had previous infection. And so they were, that was one of the things that they actually included in the trial, just to make sure that that was the right thing to do going forward. So, yeah, I thought that data point was interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay. Should kids with underlying health conditions get the vaccine?
Yes, so when you look at the recommendations for the vaccine, there's very little that actually says that you shouldn't get the vaccine from a medical point of view. So a true anaphylactic reaction, a true allergic reaction to the vaccine is probably one of the reasons not to. That being said, I think if you have underlying health conditions, it is very appropriate to talk to your child's regular caregivers in the medical field, their physicians, to get a better to know better about whether it's the right thing for your child or not. I think that's very important to make sure that you have talked to them before you do it.
Okay. Do we have any information about booster shots for kids aged 12 to 18, so that little bit older group that's been able to get the vaccine for a while now?
Yeah, so there's so it's really the 12 to 15, and the 16 to 18 has been with the adults. And so for the kids less than 18 years of age, they are still working through and studying the booster shots and, looking to the appropriate recommendations around that. So as soon as that comes out, we'll be ready to go ahead and, get those booster shots offered to kids as well.
Okay. And like you mentioned before, we're using basically all of our communication methods to get a hold of people to let them know when children are eligible to get either the first or the second dose or their booster shot. So you'll hear more from us when that's available. Okay. Can older children who have been vaccinated get their booster shot at a Children's Wisconsin primary care office? So when it is available to kids, are we able to do booster shots?
Yeah, when it is available, we do anticipate absolutely being able to do that. And as Ashley said, we've been using a lot of technology support, MyChart, text messages to be able to reach families when they are ready to do that. So,
Okay.
yeah, and I think, one of the most wonderful things to be able to say is the vaccine is readily available at lots of different places. And so, as soon as you're eligible, you should get the vaccine. And it's, it is easier to get than most other vaccines, really, at this point.
Okay.
Although I will say the flu vaccine is also very easy to get, so please.
And important to get this year.
Get the flu vaccine, please.
Okay. So this one's one we've seen a couple times. That trial size that you talked about for this younger age group seems kind of small to people. How confident can we be in that?
Yeah, and it is a question that's asked, and this is always when I see this question, I always wish I'd done better in my statistics class. But but really, I mean, any trial size, that's what they work off of, is that to make sure that they have enough data points and diversity and all of the aspects of a population that you can have that can translate to information that allows us to say is something safe for a larger population. And it is an emergency use authorization. So that allows us to continue to collect data to be able to understand what this means when we go out to a broader population. So yes, the data size definitely is sufficient for all biological modeling and statistics, and we'll continue to monitor this going forward.
Okay, and you just mentioned something that we got another question on that's similar. So what's the difference between emergency use approval and full approval of a vaccine, especially for kids?
Yeah, so it's sort of I think this COVID-19 vaccine has suddenly given us a lot of new terms to understand. So the emergency use approval is actually is sort of the first step of a full approval process for the COVID-19 vaccine. vaccine. So the initial data from the pharmaceutical companies is shared with the FDA and the CDC to allow for the vaccine to be delivered sooner than what would normally happen with the with the full approval, where they spend an enormous amount of time really digging through all of the data. So it's a way to be able to get the vaccine out in the community sooner. And then the full approval then takes all of the information that we had from the trial, as well as the knowledge from the emergency use approval, to be able to say that this is now a fully approved vaccine. And that is what has happened to the adult vaccines now.
Okay, and then do you recommend using ibuprofen or something similar for the side effects that we talked about of kids getting this COVID-19 vaccine?
Yes, absolutely. And, it's one of those things that you only want to give the medication if you need it. So there are plenty of people who get the COVID-19 vaccine and really have no major side effects, or minimal pain in the arm, so you don't have to treat that. But if you have a kiddo who's having something more, has the fever, the aches, the headaches, then yes, absolutely, ibuprofen or Tylenol can be helped to acetaminophen can be helped to support them.
Okay. All right, and then we've seen a couple questions. I think you've already addressed this, but about how kids' bodies are still developing. And so does the vaccine impact kids and their development as they get older versus, that might be different in an adult who's fully developed?
So, that question comes up just generally with vaccines, right? So, I mean, we have a lot of vaccinations, and I can safely say no, because, vaccines are a very important tool for us to prevent disease. And we have, tremendous amount of information about the safety of the vaccine and the impact on developing kids. And so it is not one of the things that we need to worry about.
Okay. It looks like that is it for the questions we have in the comments right now. Like I said, though, we will be answering questions in the comments even after this live conversation. Dr. Khare, before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to talk about or mention?
Again, I just think that this is such an exciting time for us to really sort of get to this place where our world is safer again. And, so that's the part of the vaccines. But what I think is really important to remember is that the best approach to fighting COVID-19 is still a layered approach. So, you asked me to share this, Ashley, but, when we talk to kids, we sort of talk about being a Captain America, and the medicine and the machine is what made you big and strong, and that's the vaccine that'll make you big and strong. But you also need the shield and the masking, the social distancing, washing your hands. That's all the shield that you have to protect you from COVID-19. So it's sort of important to remember that until the disease burden of COVID-19 decreases in our community, the vaccine is just one very important tool to be able to fight the illness, but you also want to still continue the layered approach and be careful. Really stay home when you're sick. Really look at approaches to decrease the spread of COVID-19 and decrease the amount of severe illnesses that we have because of this virus. So unfortunately, our masks and social distancing does not go away, and washing your hands should never go away. It's always a good idea for little kiddos, and so we want to make sure that we're doing the best we can to protect our community.
Okay. Well, I think that's going to do it for today. However, we will continue the conversation and answer as many questions as possible in the comments, so keep that conversation going. We will also be posting some helpful links within the comments, so keep an eye out for those. Special thanks to Dr. Khare for taking the time to answer all these questions today. We know that this is all very exciting and can be confusing at times, and we're here to support you. At Children's, we're taking steps to keep our patients and staff healthy so our teams can continue to provide the best care. We will be here to help and care for your child, and that will never change. Please do not hesitate to call your child's doctor's office, use my chart messaging or online urgent care if you have any needs. As a reminder, to schedule a COVID-19 vaccine for a child 5 to 11 years old at one of our primary care clinics, that can start on Monday for scheduling appointments online at childrenswi.org/COVID vaccine. Childrenswi.org/coronavirus, as you see on the screen here, has a lot of general information that you can look to, like blog posts on this topic, different Q&As, everything that you need to know can be found there. Thanks to everybody for watching. And again, thank you to Dr. Khare for taking the time.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.